So Harrison Price from the Historic Wall Center. We welcome in John Shannon, who had a 40-year association with John Garrett. He joins us from his home in Toronto. Condolences.
Well, you know what, I was actually thinking about it. It might be longer than that because I was a university student and got media passes to go watch the Toronto Toros play. And watch John Garrett play for the Toronto Toros in the World Hockey Association at Maple Leaf Gardens. So that was 76, 77. But I got to know John in his playing time in Vancouver. And while I wasn't at hockey night when he started working there, we had had long discussions the previous year about, yes, he was retiring. And yes, I thought he could be a good commentator. And was hopeful that he would consider working for Hockey Night at that point. So he was, the difficult part of all of this, and those of us that are getting older understand it. But this is a person that I don't think one observation other than I love the guy is pertinent. He might have been one of the most beloved people in the media world in this game and in the hockey world. There is not one person that had anything bad to say about John Garrett. His mood, his attitude, his love of the game, his love of people. He was part of our hockey culture in so many ways, and unfortunately, sometimes we take guys like John for granted, and only miss them when they're gone. And the only solace will be that Sharon and the family will understand now how much he meant to so many people.
Talk about, his mood, his way, sort of permeated everything that he did. And I would say that was his theme as a commentator as well, in that, he wasn't super X's and O's. He wasn't super analytical in terms of the numbers, but his mood and his storytelling carried the day. Talk about how different literally, he did a game, 4 or 5 days ago. So still a working guy at that point. I don't know if there's anybody like him, but certainly not at the national level that's left in the booth.
So Blake, here there's two things to your point which are really valid. First of all, doing the Utah Vegas series, I thought, and I had a long talk with your friend Paul Graham about this after Game 2. I thought John Garrett was outstanding in Game 2. He had been around both clubs for 3 or 4 days. He had done what he always does: go to the morning skate. He's diligent in talking to people. People respect him, so he's very approachable. He's not afraid to approach people, and then you're right, he tells stories. The other aspect of it is, and this is specifically for Canuck fans, I know there have been dark days with this franchise in the last 25 years. I know it. But John Garrett never painted dark days. John Garrett became, I think, the standard bearer of what a regional commentator should be. Like, oh, my team's not very good, but I sure like listening to Shorty and Cheech. I sure enjoy how they do the game. And what John Garrett did was he would always believe in the cup half full mentality. And he could still be critical. He could still be fair. But in the end, he understood it in terms of what everyone was going through in their lives. It was still just a hockey game. He was brilliant at it. Whether it was the chuckle or the yes, 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 or whatever thing he did, John Garrett made sure Canuck fans walked away from the game saying, wow, our team wasn't very good, but our broadcast sure was.
It was a worthwhile TV show. It was a worthwhile investment of my time in the TV show, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and I feel so badly, obviously for the family, but for Dan, who was in Salt Lake City, and for John, who wasn't. That would be heartbreaking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Shorthouse, you mean?
Yeah.
Give
Yeah.
us your understanding here, John. How did yesterday play out?
Well, as I understand it, and I don't want to make this sound like TMZ. He had elected not to go to the morning skate to do a local hit for Donnie Taylor's show,
Yeah.
and it was a no-show for the Donnie Taylor show. And then late in the afternoon, when they were supposed to leave for the rink, they couldn't get a hold of him, and they asked the hotel to do a wellness check, and the hotel found him, and soon after, the firemen and the ambulance were there, and they found out what we know now, and that he had passed away at some point, either overnight or in the morning.
Which is terrible for the two guys that are down there, obviously dealing with it, Murph included, and for the family, right? That's not how you draw it up in your brain as to how it'll happen when you lose your spouse or parent, right?
Well, but this goes, like, Gary Bettman did a statement this morning, as much as it shows respect for John, I think it really shows respect for the Garrett family to say that the game of hockey and the NHL respected, admired the sacrifices. And trust me, you guys have traveled. It's not all glamorous, but the sacrifices you make for families. And John Garrett loved what he did. And so the sacrifices weren't made by Garrett. The sacrifices were made by his family. To show that and I think in the next 2 or 3 days, I certainly hope that becomes part of the messaging is that we all loved John. But Sharon, what you gave up for John to follow what he dreamed of doing for the rest of his hockey career will certainly be appreciated.
Yeah, and we mentioned that in our opening block about Sharon and the family and sharing him with us, and how much richer we are because of John. He seemed like just a natural, gregarious personality that got through the glass, as they say in television, instantly. Was that the case in his early days of broadcasting? Was he just an absolute natural, throw on the tally right and let Cheech go? Or did you guys have to work with him? Tell us about his early days in broadcasting and the tradition and the transition he was making in professional life.
In fairness, he got hired originally at Hockey Night the year I got fired, even though we had done the spade work to get him there. But then when I went back to be the executive producer in '94, John was a mainstay, and by then John had found a niche. It was Bob and Harry were the A crew, but John was did yeoman service, would do anything he wanted. There was very little to criticize with John's work because he did it, to Blake's point, in such a way that you were sitting at the bar drinking a beer with John Garrett eating finger food, and that's an important aspect, eating finger food. And talking about the game of hockey, and his, and it goes, and every once in a while, a couple of key stories would come out, and a few names would come out, and it would be whether it was Harry, when Harry was coaching the Canucks, or Roger Nielsen, who had a long time influence on John Garrett's life, whether it be in Peterborough or in the NHL. That you could see where the common sense style that John had. I mean, the great thing about John was there was no great big voice, no big booming voice. There was no fake voice.
No.
It was just John Garrett. And then he had a great the game, goaltender's eye. they're either watching the game from the end of the bench or they're watching the game from the end of the rink. And so they have to understand everything all the time. Who can forget the stories of John Garrett in Quebec City with the Shannon, the hot dogs in his pads, sitting at the end of the bench, and next thing you know, he's getting called to play the game, and he makes a save, and the hot dog goes one way, and the mustard's on the jersey the other side. That was part of lore in John Garrett's world. Who can forget? And we've seen the video the last 24 hours. Who can forget, as a player, Mario Lemieux taking on 5'7" Gary Lupel, and the only Canuck to jump in and protect Gary Lupel was 5'8" John Garrett.
The towering John Garrett.
But that was he was such an unbelievable teammate. Even when we were all together, he would phone every once in a while and say, one of the guys is on the cruise pretty tired. You better keep an eye. He was always looking after other people on the show. He was one of those people that knew that he was, if ever, going to get the Stanley Cup final. Used to always joke that he was on the D team, but they did a hell of a lot of important hockey games. A hell of a lot of important hockey games for Hockey Night, and he just wanted to be treated as a professional, and you had to respect what he asked for, and he taught me as much about that as I hope I taught him at times.
It's funny, he passes at 74. His exuberance is that of a 7-year-old. And yet the life that he led, he should be like 105. It was sort of a Renaissance life in a lot of ways, especially from the hockey perspective. It's like it's a documentary on the early days of hockey almost. His playing career, and then even just the way that he went about life. He is both 7 and 105 all at the same time.
Which made him a great grandfather.
Yeah.
Trust me, it made him a great grandfather. And he was so proud to be a grandfather. So we haven't worked together since I left Sportsnet, but that didn't mean we didn't talk. Mm-hmm. At the same time, every once in a while, I go down the YouTube hole and I will find a game that John played in, whether it be Gordie Howe's last game, where yes, John Garrett should have received an assist, and you wonder now if the NHL will fix that. Or a game in the WHA against the Houston Aeros. And I would send him the YouTube and he'd said, "Oh, that goalie was sure good." So we tried to maintain that type of relationship. He was, he was, so, I morphed into being a commentator 15 years ago. And then I was lucky enough with my Western roots, they asked me if I would go to Columbus or Pittsburgh or Buffalo or Ottawa or Montreal with the Canucks, the Flames, and the Oilers. And I loved that. But when I went with the Canuck team, it was always special. And John was always so inviting. You're here, you're part of the crew. Mm-hmm. You're one of us. And so that meant, whether that was the dinner or, in a U.S. city trying to find Shake Shack in time to go to Shake Shack for a burger. They worked great as a team. Murphy, Shorthouse, Greg Shannon, the producer, was part of that too for a while.
Yeah.
And they were always welcoming of me. And that's the part that it was almost full circle, that I was the newbie with those guys as opposed to the other way around.
That's funny. Yeah.
You mentioned the humor. You mentioned the self-deprecating humor, the mustard on the jersey, the hot dogs, the finger foods, and all of that. Mentioned it in the earlier block as well, but nobody played the punching bag or the doofus better than John Garrett. But do not mistake that for a lack of intellect. This was a brilliant man. John, he told a story in 2004 during the lockout. He went back to Queen's to finish his English degree. This was a learned, well-read guy. who didn't always show that side of his personality, but could hang in a lot of conversations where you wouldn't necessarily think that's up John Garrett's alley if you only knew Cheech.
Again, the repartee was if sitting with him and having a discussion beyond the hockey world. There was tons of opinions that were there, and tons of logical explanation of why he believed in what he believed in. And let's also remember that his humbleness and his confidence in himself was not arrogance. I mean, in one previous lockout, if memory serves me, he was a UPS driver, driving a truck, delivering stuff while the NHL was trying to figure out how millionaires could make more money. And John would get identified. Hey, you're John Garrett. I know, I'm a UPS driver. You know, so that's part and parcel. And to your point, was he was a complete person, but not a complex person. And that's what I think that's what made him so special and so approachable around the NHL. Everybody knew John Garrett. Everybody loved John Garrett. You know.
You've covered most of it here, John, but is there anything else you would want our audience to know about John Garrett, the man that you knew so well for so long?
Well, just as I said on social media, you know, he loved the Canucks. He loved it. He loved being around the club. You know, the stories of his time as a player, then as a broadcaster. He loved the Blue Jays. He never stopped talking about baseball. If there was a chance to do a promo, John would have that extra little bit of oomph about who was going to be the starting pitcher and whether the Jays were going to make it or not. You know, the unfortunate part is that sometimes we take friendships for granted, and people who got to know him, I think, really got to love him for what he was, and then when he's gone, you're going to miss him that much more. This is not to lump them together, but this is a year now we've lost Greg Millen and John Garrett at the same time of year, and Jim Robson and Bob Cole. Yeah, Bob Cole 2 years ago. So it's such is the cycle of life, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to be missed.
John, thanks for sharing the memories. Condolences again.
Cheers, boys.